Hey everyone, welcome back. So today we're going to talk about one of my favorite pedals of all time. I have actually avoided doing any videos on this pedal for quite a while now, and that is because it's rather complicated and it's for some reason intimidated me a bit. But I'm talking about the Mood pedal. And of course, to make my life even more incredibly difficult, I decided to talk about both Mood pedals because I liked the first one so much. I decided I would also get the second one. And now you're going to see a very long comparison video of these two pedals. I've been planning this for months. I've been afraid to do it, and I finally said, all right, let's just get her done, and I know this is going to be a long haul. So I'm going to tell you right now, there's going to be chapter markers in the description if you want to bounce ahead or just go to a section that you are interested in. Now, as far as the demo goes, I'm not going to go too deep into it right now. Even kind of doing a general overview of the controls and playing around with them, that's a lot with these pedals. So I'm not going to be talking about the dip switches. I'm not going to be talking about ramping. I'm not going to be talking about bouncing. I'm not going to be talking about MIDI. I'm not going to be even diving into the hidden features on the Mark II. So maybe I'll do another video like that. If you want that, let me know in the comments, but that's a whole nother ball of wax, and I cannot cover that or this thing will be 3 hours long and nobody wants that. So that's it. Let's dive in. Let me show you one of my favorite pedals of all time. The Mood pedal is basically a 2-channel pedal, so it's easiest if you think of it that way. It's kind of 2 pedals in one. So on the right hand, and by the way, what I'm about to explain applies to both pedals. So on the right hand side, you have a micro looper channel. And on the left hand side, you have what's called a wet channel, and that has wet effects. Now, I'm massively simplifying this pedal when I say it this way, but that's just the easiest way to think of it. The controls in the middle of the pedal are shared or global controls. So we'll probably start with those just to kind of dive into this thing. So let's start talking about the mix knob. And now that knob is also the ramp knob, but basically that knob sets the balance between your input signal and the mood effects, but it's both channels simultaneously. Okay, so it's going to go full wet to full dry. So let's talk about the clock knob. Now the clock sets the sample rate on these pedals. And this clock knob is basically almost the key control on these. It's so important and it affects everything. So it controls the length and the resolution of the micro looper channel and the quality and the time of the wet channel. It's incredibly important. So I'm going to kind of revisit it a little later as we go through the things that it does impact. But I just want you to keep in mind that it deals with quality and it deals with buffer size. It's a lot like a lot of other kind of looper, micro looper pedals that are out there. So just keep that in mind as we go through when we're talking about the pedal. Now the foot switches are pretty similar for both pedals as well. The left foot switch turns on and off the wet channel. And on the Mark II, it also has a special function. So let's listen to that. So I have a reverb set up on both pedals. And in fact, I'm going to make it a little more extreme, not significantly so, but a little bit. Let's throw a loop into the Mood Mark I. And there you go. The effect is on, the effect is off. Now, let's listen to the Mark II. Effect is off. Effect is on, as you can clearly hear. Now, the Mark II also has a freeze function, so watch this. So when you hold down the left foot switch, it freezes the audio. Okay, let's get to the wet channel. Now there are 3 effects that you can generate with the wet channel, and you can choose these with that toggle switch. The 3 effects are reverb, delay, and slip, and we're going to talk about what those are in a moment. Those are the same 3 effects on both pedals though, so they didn't really change that. The time and the modify knobs in this section control what that wet channel effect does. So let's get into this. We're going to start with the reverb on the Mood Mark I. So the time knob controls the decay and the size, and the modify knob controls the smear. And it says, so the reverb on this pedal is a little interesting. It's not, it's really a bunch of smeared repeats, and it's less about it being a full, like, clean plate type reverb. So I'll let you hear that. So let's start with the Mood Mark 1. So I have the time knob at noon, and I have the modify knob at noon. Let's go full mix so you can, or at least more mix, so you can really hear what it's doing. So if we lower the time knob, and by the way, I'm sure you can hear the artifacts when I'm turning the knob while audio is happening. So I can go from a pretty quick. Here it gets kind of flangery in there. All the way up to full time on here. So again, time is decay and size, and then modify controls the smear. So if we have modify turned all the way to 0, it's very delay-like. Turn modify all the way up full. And it's much more reverby, much more smeared out. Now let's listen to the Mark II and hear what that sounds like. So as you can tell, it's the same deal. Let's got that time all the way off, or all the way very fast. Crank it. And once again, modify deals with the smearing. So now, one thing you may notice on the Mark II is the time is much longer on it than the Mark I. It is at this moment that we must dive into the world of the clock. So once again, the clock controls the quality, and the quality is at an inverse proportion to the length of the buffer. So what that means is if you turn the clock up higher, you're going to get a better quality effect, but it won't go as long. So let me show you, and that's the same on both pedals. And really quickly, I want to mention the clock on the Mark II is much, shall we say, more robust. Just trying to let you hear the smearing. So that's a good way to show it. Listen to the smearing here. When modify is cranked to 100 and the smearing is at max, and you have the clock maxed out, Listen to the quality of that. Now we're going to make the clock go lower. So did you notice that? The reverb time went way longer and the quality of the sound changed. Now, when I say quality, let me quantify the quality. Let me quantify what I mean by that. That just means, you know, that there's a loss of fidelity, but that doesn't mean that's a bad thing, right? It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It means it's taste. So you may not like the highest fidelity sound on the Mood as much as a lower fidelity. It's one of those things. So, but you're kind of giving and taking when you're turning this clock knob. That's very important. It's a very important concept to kind of keep in mind at all times. Now, with the Mark I, which I have now activated here. Okay, let's get ourselves a nice non-smeared sound here, okay? Let's crank the clock and hear what that sounds like. You can hear the smearing is definitely more effective. Now, I want you to listen to the clock on the Mark I. When that clock is all the way at the lowest setting, you get a lot of noise and a lot of many audio artifacts, right? So sometimes that's something you want, and sometimes you don't want that. And then when you're on Mark II, let's move into the delay section now. And I'm not going to spend as much time talking about the clock going forward. I'm just going to be turning it, though, so you hear some of the audio qualities. Okay, so we're going to go to the Mood Mark I, and we will start with that in the delay. So delay mode on Mood Mark I, time controls the delay time, and modify controls feedback. Now, once again, let me add the clock impacts these settings. So if we crank the feedback all the way up, you're not going to get any sort of oscillation thing going on. The repeats are stable, and they're going to pile up on top of each other. And obviously, all the way to 0, it's a single slapback. Now again, we're kind of getting into that flangey world because that repeat is so fast. Now remember, I have the clock set to noon on this pedal. So let's get our delay to kind of a noonish area. And let's hear what happens when you make the clock. You can hear the delay time is really long now, and the quality of the repeat is, shall we say, much different. And then if you crank the clock,
Yeah, that delay time is ridiculously slow. I don't know how slow it goes, but it's pretty slow even at that setting. Now, I'm sure you notice that when I'm turning knobs, it doesn't really operate like your standard delay pedal you may have on your board. You know, you're not going to get you're going to get some artifacts that are a little different than you're probably used to. I mean, when I turn the time on, you know, on the Brig, for example, that's not what happens, right? And as I turn these, you know, keep in mind that all of these knobs can be set to ramp or bounce or be hooked up to an expression pedal. And this is one of the kind of secret or not so secret abilities of the Mood. Are these kind of non-standard sounds you get when knobs are being turned real time. So this is one of those kind of creativity lunchboxes you get with this thing, right? The third wet effect is called slip. So slip mode, here's what it is. It's a buffer. It has an adjustable playback head, so it can go from half to double speed forwards or backwards. So it's another one of those effects that's kind of like the count of 5. So the time knob is going to set the sample size, and it's a little tricky to understand for me anyway. I kind of struggle with this, but the lower settings are going to produce more instant results, and they're going to act kind of like a pitch shifter, while the higher settings are going to create these phrases that kind of follow behind you. So the time is longer, and it's one of those things you just have to kind of play and listen to, and it makes more sense. The modify knob controls the playback speed and the direction of the playback head. Let's play a little guitar. And actually, I'm going to set the mix that way. So, all the way to 100 on the modify knob is going to double speed forward. So that means it's going to be, you know, higher octave, all the way down, reversed double speed. Does that make sense? So if you're here at around 0, it's actually going down half speed. So let's crank the clock and we can maybe hear it. So do you hear that? Now, remember, I just cranked the clock on the Mark I, so the quality went way up. And if you have the clock lower, you're going to get some of that glitchy aliasing. Is it aliasing? I just said that. I don't know if that's the right word. I may have totally pulled that out of my rear end. So the tricky part is finding where the knob should go because these semitones are so small. So often I just like to find the same octave but reversed. And then you can hear the difference the time knob makes on there. Now, if we go to the Mark II, it's the same control setup. And then remember, the clock interacts with the time knob and the effect itself. All right, let's get to the cool part, which is the micro looper channel. There's 3 modes of micro looping that you can engage. One's called env, or envelope, one's called tape, and one is called stretch. The length and the modify knobs do different things depending on what mode you are in. And the bypass switch alternates between recording and playback of a micro loop. So I talked about this a little earlier, but let me quickly rehash it. So on the Mark I, the red light is indicating that it's listening and recording. And when you hit it, it goes green and it indicates it's playing back the stored loop. On the Mark II, the light is off, but it is listening. The pedal is listening right now. When you hit that button, it goes green, indicating that it is playing back the stored loop. And the reason it doesn't go to red is because the Mark II will do that overdubbing. So we have to talk about the clock here once again, because I want to remind everyone how large of a role it plays also in the micro looper. Just remember, the higher the clock is, the shorter the buffer memory, but the less noise and the higher fidelity, right? So that the Mark I goes from 16 seconds to half a second, and the Mark II goes from 32 seconds to 1 second. So that's the difference in the range. That's a massive, massive change in the clock as far as its quality and its buffer size. I also want to say, I'm sure you've noticed, the clock on the Mark II has far less noise in it. So if you're lowering the clock on the Mark II, you're going to find it much more usable. So first of all, I'm not going to call it env, I'm going to call it envelope. And I'm assuming it stands for envelope. If it doesn't, oh well, I can't say env anymore. So envelope mode allows you to dynamically interrupt your loop. And so you can create these stutters, time stretching, frozen notes, that kind of thing. When you stop playing, the loop resumes as normal. And this whole process works by breaking your loop up into little slices. So whatever slice is playing at the moment of interruption will loop within itself when you interrupt it. Now, the length knob controls the size of the slice, and the modify knob controls the sensitivity of your audio that can interrupt it. And again, when you interrupt it, it will freeze the note. So let's try this. I'm going to, first of all, record a loop into the micro looper on Mood 1. So let's do that now. So as you can tell, it's listening. It's always listening. And every time that little red light flashes, I'm kind of rehashing some things from before. That means that the length of the loop has reset. So that kind of gives you an idea of how much it's recording and how long it's recording. The clock, once again, changes that. So if I crank it, as you can see, that light flashes faster. That's because the loop size is now much smaller and the quality is very good. If you turn this all the way down, now the loop size is going to be much longer, but the quality is going to be kind of not so usable, in my opinion. But again, that's everyone's decision on what to do. Let's leave it at noon for now, and I'm going to go ahead and play a loop. I have grabbed that loop. So this is what is playing in the micro looper on the Mood right now. That is all you are hearing. So what's going to happen now is I'm going to turn this and you'll start hearing those slices. So those are kind of the ready-made slices on the Mood pedal. Obviously, once again, the clock and its setting is affecting all of this. This is where the modify knob comes into play. So the modify knob is going to allow me to interrupt this and freeze it in one of those slices. So I'm going to play over this. It won't do anything until I play over it. Okay, do you hear that? Now, there's a point where the sensitivity will not pick up what I'm playing, depending on how hard I'm playing. And I'm playing pretty hard right here, and it's not grabbing it, so... Let's try the same thing on Mark II. So I'm going to play that same loop. I'm going to let it grab it. Okay. Now we're in envelope mode. Let me see if you can even... Now you notice you're not hearing the slices on the Mark II, and that's one of the differences between the two pedals. So now let's try to hear me playing and try to kind of interrupt the mode. There we go. Now we're going to go into tape mode. Now, tape mode allows you to adjust the speed and direction of your loop in quantized steps. So length is going to control the loop length, and the modify controls the playback speed and the direction. So it's just pretend you have a little tape player that you're able to mess with. So let's listen to the difference with these pedals. We're going to do the same thing on each one. We're going to play a loop, and actually we'll start with the Mark I again. Okay. Now I want to show you something here. We've got that tape speed very low here. And we also had the length very short. Now this is in quantized steps, so it's not quite as unwieldy as slip mode, which is great because some of those semitones are a little hard to dial in. I feel like this particular sound here is a very common way to use this pedal, where you get this kind of reverse thing going on. Now you notice on the Mark I that once you start sending things down an octave, there's a lot of noise that starts kicking in. Now, let me show you a little thing with the clock here, because you might be thinking to yourself, well, self, I think I want less noise in there. I'm just going to crank the clock now, and what'll happen is that'll just clean that up. Well, that's not quite how it works. Once that loop is in the buffer, when you turn the clock, you're going to pitch shift the loop. So I'm trying to kind of set this to where it's in a kind of a semi-normal state, right? And so you're also able to pitch shift your loop by turning clock. And by the way, this pitch shifting I'm doing can happen anytime you have a loop in the micro looper. So you can go really super high and just glitchy super mess. So let's try this again. Let's say that we want the highest fidelity on the Mark I because we want to reverse and go down an octave on the tape setting on the micro looper. So let's re-record our loop. But as you can tell, I don't have a lot of notes I'm able to record here because I cranked the clock. So that's my loop now. Even when I crank the length all the way up, that's as good as it's going to get. So you have this little tiny loop that has been recorded at a higher quality, but there's less of it. So there's limits with what you can do. It would, obviously the dream is to be able to turn the clock and, manipulate sounds without having audio quality issues, and also to just, obviously the widest palette possible is the ideal, right? Well, I will say that Chase Bliss has gotten much closer to that on the Mark II because the clock has so much range compared to the Mark I, and it has far less noise. So if we go to let's do the same thing. So let's listen to the highest quality clock. You can hear the difference there, right? There's definitely more audio that was recorded. Just the clock is so much more robust on the Mark II. It's remarkable what they did. So once again, with the length, you can hear the loop length. We'll go fully long on it, and we'll also go down, reversed an octave. You can hear how different that sounds now. That sounds way different than on the Mood Mark I. Far less glitchy, just sounds a little more natural, if reversing and, dropping down an octave is ever natural, but... So stretch mode time stretches your loop and allows you to kind of zoom in and smear it. So the length knob controls the slice size, because this mode slices your loop up into slices. And the modify controls the amount of stretching that happens. Now on the Mark II, it also controls the direction of the stretch. So let's listen to the difference between the pedals. I'm going to set them both at noon. And we'll just go from there. I do realize that the clock on the Mark II is definitely different than on the Mark I, but we're just going to go with noon because it's just simpler. So, okay, we have a loop going in each one of these. Let's start with Mark I. So, when I turn this knob, you can hear the slices. They're getting very small, and you can definitely hear them. Obviously, the more you turn this up, less obvious it is where the slices are happening. And from this point, you can start stretching it. So here's no stretching, or the minimal amount of stretching. And longer slice sizes. Okay, let's listen to Mood Mark II, same deal. Now, as you probably have noticed, this sounds drastically different. One thing is this knob is very different from Mark I. So on this knob, I'm going to show a graphic on the screen so you can see the difference. But the most stretching is at the top, and the least is at noon, least is at 100 and 0. That's no stretching. So from 0 to noon, it's reverse stretching, and the closer you get to noon, there's more stretching. From noon to 100, it's forward stretching, and again, the closer you get to noon, it's the most stretching. This is the slice size. So there's little tiny slices. No stretching. No stretching, but reversed. I'm going to try to approximate the setting on Mood Mark I on the Mood Mark II, and that's probably pretty close. Here's one difference you may notice between these two pedals. Here's the Mood Mark I, still playing. I've got the length of the slices set to, you know, about 2 o'clock, and I've got full stretching happening. Same settings on Mood Mark II. Sounds drastically different, doesn't it? So to kind of approximate what you're getting on Mood Mark I, you have to do a little more fiddling. And you have to remember also that the slice sizes are probably going to be a little larger due to the clock. Again, depending on how you have the clock on the various pedals. But that seems to be a little closer to what I'm getting on Mood Mark I. So, Mood Mark I. Sure you hear all that beautiful clock noise in the background there. Mark II. Okay, and finally we're going to deal with the routing toggle. So the routing toggle controls what gets processed by the wet channel. This kind of brings everything together that we've covered so far. Now this toggle switch only has an effect when both channels are on. So if you, for example, right now I am playing a loop out of the Mood Mark II, okay? That is playing, it's green, it's doing its thing. So, if I play a little guitar right now, you don't hear an effect. Right now I have this set for delay, and the reason you don't is because I don't have that turned on. Well, now I have the wet channel turned on, so now so you hear the delay on my guitar, but you don't hear it on the loop. So that's what position 1 does. Now position 2 makes the wet channel affect everything. Any guitar I put into it and the micro looper. So now you hear the delay is actually hitting the micro looper and it's affecting my guitar as well. Now when you go to the far right on this, position 3, the wet channel only affects the micro looper. So right now the delay is hitting the micro looper. But not my guitar. Okay, and finally we're going to talk about the preset toggle. So the left and the right positions each store a preset, and the middle position is your live settings. So let's say we love the way we have the Mood Mark II set up right now, and both pedals work the same way. So to save to the right slot, you're going to hold the right foot switch for 3 seconds and then add the left foot switch for another 3 seconds. Okay, so whichever one you hold down first is going to basically indicate what side of this toggle it will be saving that preset to. So let's say I want to save what I have on here right now. Let's say I want to save this preset to the right side. Well, I'll hold this down for 3 seconds. And then we're going to do this for 3 seconds. And boom, it went. Okay? So now we're in this preset right here. So that means that, let's say on the central one, I have a reverb. Okay. And actually, let's... And then obviously if I go to this preset, I've got that delay I had earlier. So that's how that works. It's pretty straightforward if you remember it. This is actually one thing about the Chase Bliss pedals that I have a problem with is I tend to forget how to save the presets, and I always have to look them up in the manual. I just cannot, for the life of me, get it embedded in my brain. So, okay, now that we've gone through all of that, we're going to one more time talk about the clock knob again, because now that you have all the information in your head, let's just kind of reiterate it. So once again, the clock sets the sample rate. It controls the length and resolution of the micro looper channel, and it controls the length and the resolution of the wet channel. The quality and the time, all that stuff is affected by clock. Its tone, its length, its quality, all in one knob. What makes it interesting, though, is it moves in musical harmonized steps. Let's have a loop going. Okay, so here we are on Mood Mark 1. So as you can see, you're changing everything. You're changing the quality of the delay, because I have the delay effect on. You're changing the quality of the loop, and you're changing the pitch.
Okay, that was a lot. So those pedals are complicated, and even the Mark I is extremely complicated. So I know this video has been going on for a long time. It's probably 45 minutes in. I can't wait to edit this monster that it has become, and this is the last time I'm going to try to compare two Chase Bliss pedals to each other. Again, I didn't cover a lot. I didn't cover the ramping. I didn't cover the dip switches. I didn't cover listening to the Mark II in stereo. So yeah, I might do that in another future video if I'm feeling particularly masochistic. But for now, that's what you're getting. And I hope this answered a lot of your questions. Now, one of the main reasons that I did this video was I wanted to answer the question of if you have a Mark I Chase Bliss Mood, is it worth it to upgrade to the Mark II? And that's a great question. And that's something, even owning these pedals, I've had to think about for quite a while now. I think the Mark II is better in almost every single way. So the fact that the clock is far more robust on the Mark II, the sound quality obviously is improved. It's cleaner. On the Mark I, when you turn the clock down to a certain point, I just find it unusable. So anything past, I'd say 10 o'clock on the Mood Mark I usually don't even use. Now, that's a matter of taste. Some people probably use those areas. I don't. I just find it too noisy and it gets too glitchy to be something that I want to use in a musical setting. The Mood Mark II is much better about that. You just have a wider range of usable sounds within the clock. So there's one thing about the Mood Mark I that I like better than the Mood Mark II, and that is the stretch mode on the micro looper. So there's a certain sound in a certain setting on the Mark I that I use all the time. It's actually the reason I fell in love with the pedal in the first place. And I can dial in that sound very, very easily and quickly on the Mark I and just get it going. On the Mark II, I can't quite replicate that sound. The way they changed the stretch mode, it's not giving me that thing I like to do in a better way. Now, I'm sure if I fiddle with it long enough, I'll find an area that's close, because maybe I have to move the clock speed down and do some other tweaks, or maybe even, hit a switch on the back. I don't know. I just know that one sound I can dial in very quickly on the Mark I, and on the Mark II, I can't really seem to find it in quite the same way. So that is the one reason that I would say the Mark I has an advantage over the Mark II. Again, this is all cork sniffing at some point, right? It's all like personal preference. It's all what we love and what we find we commune with the pedal. So that being said, if you have the Mark I and you want more audio options and a greater palette, I think you should get the Mark II. I think it makes sense to get that, especially if you use it a lot. You've heard the audio quality differences. They are significant. However, if you love the Mark I and the Mark I's doing what you want it to do, then I don't know if you really need to upgrade, to be honest. I will say that for myself, I specifically got the Mark II because I wanted 2 mood pedals. So that's why I got it. I didn't really get it because I was sad about the Mark I. I simply wanted another one. And I was like, oh, cool. Well, if it has extra things it does, that's a benefit to me. That's a bonus. Okay, so that's it, everyone. Thank you very much. Again, please like the video and share it and subscribe and all that good stuff. I will see you next time. Have a great week. Thank you.